We're going to move House File 3874. Actually, Chair Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will move House File 3874 to be laid over for possible inclusion in a finance bill.
Thank you, Chair Liebling. Please, the bill is before us. Please introduce yourselves and go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning, Co-Chairs Scott and Liebling. My name is Jeff Shorba. I'm the State Court Administrator for the Minnesota Judicial Branch, and happy to be here with you this morning. Along with me is Judge Michael Fritz, who's the Chief Judge in the 7th Judicial District, and you'll be hearing from him shortly. So, just a reminder, I was supposed to push this button. Anna. This doesn't move it. Okay. So, just a reminder of the placement of the judicial branch in our Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution guarantees that people provided with justice have equal access for the fair and timely resolution of cases and controversies without denial, without promptly, and without delay. And so we are coming here today to talk briefly with you, but we wanted to start out by thanking you. We know it was a difficult session last session, and there were a lot of budgetary constraints, but you were willing to increase the hourly payment rate for our contract forensic examiners, develop a new justice partner system, which is well underway and will be launched shortly, covering the employer's share of health insurance costs and our lease costs at the Judicial Center, and increasing employee compensation, although only at the level of 0.9%. Unfortunately, we did not get any salary increases for fiscal year 27 for our staff, and no increases for judges for the 2 years. And we did have a healthy ask for juror per diem, and there was no money to do that as well. So just a preview, we may be back next session to talk with you further about some of these items, but thank you for what you were able to do. Given the uncertainty that we are having in the state, some of that maybe have been remedied a little bit by the forecast last week, but we understand that funding is tight and this is not a formal budget year. But our council has put forward a request for 2 items. One is some provisions to increase safety and security for our judicial officers and staff, and the second to pay the employer share of the new Minnesota paid leave program. So I'll talk first briefly about safety and security, and then Judge Fritz will provide his comments, and then we'll talk a little bit about Minnesota paid family leave. Threats are on the rise, both nationally and in Minnesota, to all public officials, including judges and court staff. The tragic shooting of lawmakers last June has been felt throughout the judiciary. We are seeing similar threats come to play in other jurisdictions. In Indiana recently, a state judge was at home, knock on the door, and someone shot him and his wife when they answered the door, similar to what we saw last June. Luckily, he survived. The litigant felt like he did not want his trial to move forward and decided the best way to do that was to shoot the judge. Unfortunately, we see a lot of this reaction, not only to those kinds of situations, but decisions of judges where the response seems to be threats rather than appeals to the Court of Appeals. So you can see from the slide that total incidents are up 47%, threats are up 85%, and actual disturbances occurring in a court facility up by 50%. And so we are tracking those numbers, and we continue to see them rise year after year. So those numbers that I just talked about were 24 to 25. As a result, our top priority is to secure funding for a package of proposals that we believe will help improve safety and security of judicial officers. There are 5 components to the proposal, so I'll just briefly go through those 5. The first is funding to provide personal data protection. This request would fund annual licenses for a service that continuously removes or masks personal information. We're modeling after things that the legislature is doing themselves for their members, I believe in the House and the Senate. This is something where we would work with a vendor to provide this protection on an individual basis for our judges and for our court administrators. The second involves home security, again, modeled after some of the work already being done in the legislature. The dollar amounts here that you see on the screen are ones that are modeled after, I believe, the Senate ideas that they're implementing there. Judges will tell you that, especially if they have some kind of screening in their courthouse, they may feel safe there, but the problems occur when they go home. And we're seeing more and more threats directed at judges' residences and, unfortunately, judges' families. And so home security is something certainly on the mind of our judiciary. The next request is to seek 2 positions to supplement our judicial security unit. We operate in 103 locations across the state, and we have 1 person who helps coordinate security. And initially, she was hired to do things like continuity of operation plans and policy planning, but unfortunately now she's spending most of her time doing threat assessment analysis and working with the BCA and our local law enforcement. So we believe it would be helpful to have individuals with a law enforcement background who could help us to do those threat assessments. As you know all too well here, when you get a threat, the first question you ask if you're not a law enforcement person is, what should I do with this? How serious is it? What should I tell my family? Where should I take precautions? And unfortunately, even though we send all of ours to the BCA Fusion Unit, it takes a little while to get an answer. And so we believe having some staff who can help us with that, maybe not located here in St. Paul, but maybe on a geographic basis somewhere else to look at those threats. The fourth component has to do with Chief Justice security. We're requesting funding to provide security for the Chief Justice when she goes to public events. This is not a security detail, as you find with the governor, but rather she attends about 80 to 100 public events every year, and we would like her to be escorted by somebody who can protect her, somebody with a gun. So this amount of funding, it's about $100,000, would permit contracting with the State Patrol or some other law enforcement to provide that protection when she is traveling to public events. And then finally, we are asking to resurrect our courthouse security grant program. We have done this on 3 other occasions. These are matching grants given out to the counties to shore up courthouses. As the number of threats go up, the counties are becoming more concerned about some of the courthouses around the state who could use some updates. And so we're asking for a one-time funding here of $1 million to provide grants to counties across the state. Here's an overview of the safety and security cost breakdown for each of these items going out into 28 and 29. You also, I believe, have in your packets some information provided by the Minnesota District Judges Association, who are also supportive of this request. And I will pause now and ask Chief Judge Fritz to provide any comments on the package.
Good morning, co-chairs Scott and Liebling and members of the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. As introduced, my name is Michael Fritz, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Judge of the 7th Judicial District. The 7th Judicial District is made up of 10 counties, and it extends from St. Cloud to Moorhead. There are Becker County, where I am chambered, Benton County, Clay County, Douglas County, Mille Lacs, Morrison, Otter Tail, Stearns, Todd, and Wadena. We have 30 judges and 1 referee. I have been a judge for 12 years, almost 2 years as a chief judge of the 7th Judicial District. And before I was appointed to the bench, I was county attorney of Becker County for 7 years. And for 14 years, I served as an assistant Becker County attorney. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of the judicial branch's safety and security request today. As previously mentioned, and I believe it deserves highlighting again, over the past few years, the branch has seen concerning increases in total incidents reported of 47%. Threats to persons and property has increased by 85%, and reported disturbances occurring in court facilities has increased by 50%. These percentage increases are alarming, which is why our judicial safety and security request is so vitally important to the safety of judges and their families, court administration, and for the public that enter our courthouses every day across our great state. For perspective, there were 211 incident reports filed statewide in 2024. In 2025, there were 310 incident reports made. That comes to nearly 6 incident reports per week. Just in the past 2 months, there have been 11 incident reports filed in the 7th District alone. Counting the one reported yesterday at 10:40 in the morning, we are at 12. That average is more than 1 per week, and if we continue at the same pace, the 7th District will have over 60 incident reports filed in 2026, which would double our 2025 number. State Court Administration Office currently has 1 person that intakes and responds to these incident reports. In many incidents, individual chief judges are attempting to help with the responses, or the individual judge is left trying to figure out measures to keep themselves and their families safe. Gaining 2 experienced persons with law enforcement backgrounds would greatly assist with threat assessments, threat responses, coordination with law enforcement, training, and emergency planning. In my combined 32 years as a lawyer and judge, I have never experienced the level of hostility and the number of threats that exist today towards judges and their families. Judges face threats that are more personal and vindictive in nature because the decisions we make commonly impact on a person's freedom, family, and/or finances. We decide cases and controversies daily where the parties are asking that we rule in their favor. Our decisions can invoke strong emotional reaction, including anger when our ruling is contrary to the party's request. Anger can escalate into threats, intimidation, and/or harassment. A judge in my district had a litigant in a contested custody proceeding discover where the judge lived and came to the judge's home during the workday while the judge's daughter was in the home. The litigant was recorded on a doorbell camera berating the judge, and the judge's child was home and had listened to that. Fortunately, the child didn't go to the door, and fortunately, the individual left without further incident. And I'm just going to interrupt right now and just say this may sound clunky as I go through this because I keep referencing the judge. I'm not naming the judge, I'm not naming the county, and I'm not naming a pronoun for it. I reached out to each judge that I will be discussing here today with some of these incidents and asked for their permission to tell a bit of their story, and I'm not including all the details because we don't want to really reignite the flames again. And so I apologize if it does sound clunky coming out. Another judge left in the middle of a judicial conference immediately after being informed that a litigant in a contested custody matter was asking court administration staff for the judge's address. On a previous occasion, that same litigant had been observed in the area where the judge parks at the courthouse. The judge did not want his family home alone in the event the litigant learned of the home address. And the event was so concerning, the judge felt it necessary to provide identifying information of the litigant to the child's school bus driver. And the law enforcement also notified the liaison officer at the child's school as well. Persons asking court administration staff for personal information about a judge is a common occurrence. Where do judges park? Where does a judge live? What time does the court day end? All are examples of reports I have heard before. Home security, online masking, an expanded judicial security unit would enhance the safety and security of judges and their families. In one county, 2 judges' homes have been repeatedly surveilled by drones. One incident, the judge was woken up at approximately 2 a.m. in the morning by a family pet. When the judge opened the door to let the dog out, there was a drone right in front of the door, approximately 10 feet off the ground. The drone activity continued on a number of occasions over a period of time, and not at a distance of 400 feet, which I believe is the federal regulation of how far they have to be away from residences. The surveillance was low or flying low. During one incident, the law enforcement was able to make it to the residence with a chase drone. However, due to the size and speed of the suspect drone, they were never able to catch it. Law enforcement reported that the drone was not the type of drone that a teenager would have. They estimated the cost in the thousands of dollars. Judges have had their private phone numbers discovered by litigants. One judge received repeated threats and intimidating comments like, "I know where you live, I'm coming to your home." The calls were constant for a period of 15 minutes, even after the judge had hit the reject button. It did not stop until the judge handed her phone over to a Hennepin County deputy. And this was a judge from my district who was at a conference in Minneapolis here, a judicial conference, when these calls started. The litigant had made multiple concerning, threatening comments in 4 different counties. There were 5 different law enforcement agencies involved, initially conducting their own investigations response until it was discovered he was a litigant in those other 4 counties. Another incident involved multiple counties in multiple districts involving 3 different law enforcement agencies, including the FBI. In both cases, an expanded judicial security unit and intake process with a coordinated response would have likely reduced hours of investigation and a faster threat response. Judges have experienced social media online doxing and threats of doxing. In one instance, due to the nature of the online threats and threats to be at a judge's home on a particular date at a particular time, a date and time when that judge was going to be on vacation with family, the chief of police was so concerned that he removed the judge's mailbox from its post so the address wouldn't be as easy to find. And the chief of police parked his personal pickup truck at the bottom of the judge's driveway so nobody could gain access to the driveway and to the home. These are but a few examples, and I don't have to repeat today other disturbing and threatening incidents described in the MDJA's position paper that I'm sure you have all received by now. And I could go on sharing other incidents with you. However, I'm fully aware that as elected officials, you understand and appreciate the need for and importance of keeping judges, their families, court administrators, and the public safe. The measures identified in our request will aid in strengthening security at critical points, judges' homes, courthouses, and online environments. And I respectfully ask that you support the judicial branch's safety and security request. Thank you once again for this opportunity to testify on this very important funding request.
Thank you, Chief Judge. Thank you for being here and for sharing those stories with us. What are we doing next here? Okay, I think, Mr. Schorber, you're going to go ahead with the remainder of the slides?
Yeah, so
Perfect,
the
go
last
ahead.
part of our supplemental request has to do with the cost of Minnesota paid leave. As you're all aware, this went into effect in January of 2026. There is an employer share of the cost that has to be paid by the employer. The judicial branch did not receive any funding at the last session to pay for this. There was some funding that was given through negotiations at the end of session to the other branches of government. We are not here to debate Minnesota paid family leave. We're just here to see if we could have a little bit of a fairness thing here with some funding to the judicial branch as well. Anytime we get these mandates, we comply with them. They're the law. But this amount of money is not something that we can easily absorb. We're 90% people in the judicial branch, so right now we are having to figure out how to hold positions open to pay the cost of Minnesota paid leave. So that is our supplemental funding request, and I will pause there before I move on to policy proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Shorba. We'll move on now to member questions. Representative Bliss?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like you said, we're not here to debate family leave. I want to know why we're funding, what makes you different than for instance, I've just met with the Congress of Minnesota Resorts up there. Small employers, 1, 2 employees, they can't come to us and ask for funding, extra funding for this. What makes this different? Why can't you just absorb the costs like you're expecting all of our businesses to do, or we're expecting all of our businesses to do?
Mr. Shorba?
Chair Scott, Representative Bliss, that certainly is a legitimate question. We know that there are a lot of other places who are burdened with some of the costs here. I would just say 2 things. One is again, the fairness issue. If it was good enough for the legislature and the executive branch to receive funding, I don't know why the third branch of government was kept out of that. We had initially put together an estimate that went to MMB, thinking that MMB would try to find funding for this, but that did not go through, and instead there were some deals made at the end of session that helped the other 2 branches, and to be honest with you, we were not in the room. So we did not have access to the decision makers in that. Second point I'll make is we are part of state government, and this is a mandate of state government, and I think it's only fair that if the state government is going to mandate this, that every branch, if they're going to get funding, receive funding for it. So that's why we have the ask.
Thank you, Mr. Shorba. Follow-up to that?
Just one comment. Yeah, I agree with your statement. If the state government mandates it, they should fund it. So I'd like our small businesses to follow the same. Thanks.
Very fine. Representative Steer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one question, you're going to have to walk me through this threat process. So judge receives a threat, it goes into one person who's taking all these threats and vetting them. Why are we not using local police and sheriff's offices for this?
Mr. Shorba?
Chair Scott, Representative Steer, we're trying to send them not only to the Fusion Center, but also we do have discussions then with local law enforcement and trying to coordinate with local law enforcement how to get a response back to the judge or to the staff member who got the threat. And that takes coordination. And as Chief Judge Fritz said, sometimes that coordination with local law enforcement is done by the chief judge, who obviously has other things to do as well. And so we'd like to have better coordination, because the other example he gave you is we may know this guy from Carver County or Ramsey County, and now something's showing up in Stearns County. And so we could better coordinate that with especially some people with law enforcement experience, but that's how we do it right now. It's a little haphazard.
Representative Steer?
All right, thank you for that. Just since I have the floor, on 2.27 of this one, so you're giving the State Patrol the same peace officer authority as a local police or sheriff. I just want to ensure that we're giving them training for this. State Patrol troopers are trained in 169, so that's your traffic code, and local police and sheriffs are 169 and 609 criminal code. So we're asking the state troopers to do criminal code when they've never been trained on how to act or respond to criminal code. So if there's a funding piece we can do here, or talk to the State Patrol to ensure that the troopers that are going to be assigned to this actually have the training to enforce it, that would be great.
Thank you, Representative Steer. Mr. Shorba, any comment on that?
Chair Scott, Representative Steer, I think that's an excellent point, and we are currently talking with the State Patrol about this. You're correct. Some of them are trained differently, especially the ones who provide services to the governor, and so we might want to use some of that. We are testifying Monday in the Transportation Committee, and I'm sure we'll get a question like that. And obviously, those would be the right venues to see if there's additional training costs that we don't know about.
Thank you. Representative Feist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of comments. The stories that you shared really are terrifying, and we appreciate the role of judges in the judicial branch so much. So I'm sorry that you're going through that. We also are going through that. One of my teenage son's friends did a ding-dong ditch in our house in the middle of the night, and it was so terrifying. My daughter slept in our bed. So, and it was just the stupid teenagers. So anyway, I'm just sorry for what judges are also going through. I also wanted to just make a comment on the paid family medical leave. I'm a small business owner, and if we have to absorb cost, so far it hasn't really had an impact, but to the extent we do, the impact is maybe I can't buy more fancy shoes. When you have to absorb cost, what it might mean is that people don't have access to justice, and that people are not having their constitutional rights met by the judicial branch. So I do think that the investment in my shoes does not equate to the investment that we make in the judicial branch. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And Judge Fritz, I also want to just express my solidarity with you, I guess would be the right word, and with all of the judges. And, I often think that as elected officials, of course, we experience a lot of the same, but I can't imagine it's to the degree that judges do because of the very reasons you put forward. You're making somebody mad almost every day. Every case, somebody's going to walk away disappointed, most likely. And so there's a lot of potentially angry people. And I just want to express, first of all, that we really appreciate that about the work that judges do. And it truly is public service. We appreciate that. And I hope that Minnesotans broadly really appreciate that. That said, I just have a few questions about the proposal that has been put forward here. I do think that having somebody in the judicial branch to sort of be that liaison person and to help with threat assessment and all that is an excellent idea. And I had a meeting with the Chief Justice about that issue. But I kind of recall that she was talking about one additional person. Maybe I misremember that, but I'm just really wondering, honestly, it seems really picky to even ask this question, but we're in such a thin budget time. So why two instead of one? And my sort of second thought about that is, if it was two, whether one of those could be somebody who kind of doubles as somebody to accompany the Chief Justice some of the time, if that's something that the branch views as a priority. So maybe you could address that.
Mr. Shorba.
Sure. Madam Chair, Chair Liebling, we were looking at other jurisdictions, other states, to see what they are providing in terms of judicial security, and we came up with two because of the number of threats when we compared them with some other jurisdictions. And your point, which I don't think is a bad one, is possible if we get two positions that one could accompany. We'd obviously want somebody who is licensed to carry a firearm and has the ability to use it in a way that would potentially protect the Chief Justice, but I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility if we're going to be looking for someone. That's a very good idea.
Chair Liebling.
Thank you. And then, and let me just say, too, that as I understand, the position you're looking for is someone who would be kind of a bit comparable to what we have here with Lori Hodap, who's our, what's her title?
Sergeant at Arms.
Sergeant at Arms, thank you. Yeah, so she functions that way for us here in the legislature, and, that's been extremely beneficial to us. So I do think that that could be a sort of a force multiplier, if you will, to really help figure out what to do in each of these situations and more broadly. Let's see, I also did want to ask you on the paid leave front, to explain, we did have the full budgeting process last year. I know that it was a thin budget. I mean, from my point of view, I felt, we were able to do some things for the judicial branch. We kind of worked on what were your priorities and we tried to be fair with the limited budget we had across all the agencies that we fund here. And I know that it was thin. But we did not hear anything in your budget request about the need to do the paid family leave employer portion. And I think it was well known at the time that that was coming. I mean, you've mentioned you went to MMB with that, and I don't know, why did you not come to us with that request? Was that something that you were led to believe would come another direction, or because this would be the committee where I assume we would be funding that? And
Mr.
I think
Shorba.
we would have funded it, to be quite frank.
Mr. Shorba.
Chair Scott, Chair Liebling, as I mentioned, we worked very closely with MMB, followed their guidelines for calculating what the amount would be to the judiciary. It's a pretty straightforward math equation, percentage of salary in the branch. And then we were led to believe that since all of state government was going to tackle this problem, it would be a massive bill rather than going to each particular committee to try to fund it. And so that's what we did. And I don't think each committee did fund it. I think what happened is in final negotiations, what is called, and I don't really know exactly what it is since we don't get it, but operational adjustments were given to two branches of government to deal with things like this rather than the judicial branch. We did not get any operational adjustment money. So for some reason, and again, we weren't in the room, the decision was made to fund this in a different way and not to give it to us. And we didn't find out about that till the show was over. So that's why we're in this position. I wish that we had sort of done some insurance and come to you separately and not just relied on what we thought the process was going to be. That lesson learned for future, but that's what the situation was.
Chair Liebling.
Well, thank you for that. I think that was really an error. And I mean, from my past experience in different committees, the operational adjustments do come to the committees, whether they're granted, obviously at the end of the day, there's a grand budget agreement between the House, Senate, and the governor. But if it doesn't filter up from the committees, oftentimes it doesn't exist. And I do want to say on the record that I am concerned about the judicial branch being left out. And, as legislators, we have leadership that goes in and negotiates for us at the end. But we're not just abdicating our role to our leadership. They answer to us, at least this is my view, right? We as legislators, we don't elect leadership and then work for them, they work for us. And so if we are to be advocates for the judicial branch has to come and tell us what you need so that we can be advocates for you. It is very distressing to me that you're left out of the negotiation at the end. And I think the people on this committee and in the committee in the Senate that is the Judiciary Committee, we are the legislators who most closely should be understanding of the judiciary and its important role, and that it is a separate branch of government, and we have to be the advocates for you. Mm-hmm. So I hope that in future we can work ever more closely together. We may not always agree with you. In fact, I'm sure some of the requests here that you're making today, we may not agree with all of it, but nevertheless, the importance of your role and the fact that you need to be at the table, absolutely. And, please do call on us to be in that role so that we can do it for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Liebling. And I just want to say, Mr. Sherb, I want to thank the Chief Justice. She reached out to me after the fact and expressed her disappointment of not being invited to the table by the governor. It's a huge oversight on his, if there's an oversight or intentional, I can't, I don't know what was happening in those final hours. But to leave your branch out of those talks, there's some righteous indignation there. And so I hope that that won't happen again. And I do urge you to come to us with those kind of concerns. And before we move on to the policy pieces, I just want to say, and Representative Feist, love ya, have great respect for you, but this is so much more than a difference of buying a new pair of shoes, this paid family and medical leave. I hear about this issue everywhere I go, church, Target, Walmart, chambers of commerce. It's a huge burden on particularly on our small businesses. And to equate it to just a simple pair of shoes, it's just life and death for a lot of these businesses. And because not only do they have to help fund this, but they have to get somebody to backfill when that employee is out up to 20 months out of the year. So I just want to put that on the record. And Mr. Shorba, let's go ahead. What we're going to do right now is lay this bill over, and then we will move on to House File 3874 is laid over.